Hello and welcome back to this video series on conveying the importance of your scientific work through your writing. This video here is especially for pretty much any science writer, as the problem that we're going to be covering here is one of the biggest I see across the board, across every level of scientific writers. Here in today's video, we're going to talk about how to make sure you are properly and directly conveying the gaps in existing work that led up to the development of your idea and your project, no matter whether you're writing a research paper or a research grant proposal. So if you're ready to diagnose this in your own papers and figure out exactly how to fix this for yourself, then stay tuned. This is the video for you. So the first place where direct statements of gaps are usually missing in a paper is the introduction. The introduction of a paper is where we set up previous work in the field, show the reader what's been done before. So here it's very important to walk the reader not just through some stuff that's been done previously, but walk them up to that edge of current knowledge that existed when you started this project. Why did you need to start this project? Why were there holes? What were those holes? Where are they? What needed to be filled in that led up to you developing the idea for this research project? The first way that we're going to do this then is we're going to break down an ideal introduction section. So you can find below a link to this introduction and a link to my previous videos here and previous posts on my both YouTube channel and my blog, showing what I mean by breaking down an introduction. So here first, I'm going to use different colors, different shades of green to convey different parts of the introduction. So the darker green, the broader in scope this introduction is going to be. And I can let you watch the other videos if you're interested, but for this, basically we're going to pay attention to both the flow of the green in this introduction as well as any text highlighted in yellow, which is going to indicate to us a direct statement of a gap, okay? So taking what I consider to be an ideal introduction, I'm going to color it according to this color scheme. So looking at this introduction, the first thing that I want you to notice is that every single paragraph, except for the last one in this introduction, ends with yellow text, which means that every single paragraph in this introduction ends with a direct, explicit statement of where a gap is existing in the field that needed to be solved or needed to be addressed. This means that nobody is going to question the importance of trying to do the work that you're doing, okay? Because it's obvious with this introduction where there were existing gaps in the field, and as long as you're able to tie those into the work that you did, it's going to be clear, perfectly, beautifully clear to your reader why you're doing this work. If these statements are missing from your introduction, if you look at your introduction, especially towards the ends of the paragraphs where these are usually found, and you don't see this, you don't see something that you would consider a direct, explicit statement of an existing gap in the field, what this means is that you are expecting your reader to read your introduction, to interpret the information you're giving them, and come up with where that gap is, okay? And again, like when I talked about direct and implied statements in the first video, very few readers are going to come up with exactly what you want them to come up with at this point. Most readers' interpretations are not going to match yours. So to make sure that this importance is clear, we want to have these statements directly in our introduction and make them very clear and very obvious. One more thing to notice here about the introduction of the research paper, I want to talk about this specifically because we have two different types of gaps here at play. Notice that I have dark green text here and a lighter color green text here. So first, we have some really dark green text that's really broad in scope that's setting up your whole field of research. And then notice the rest of the text after that is talking about your field of research. So first, we're setting up the field of research in this introduction, and you can look at this more in the introduction video if you want some details on this. But first, we're setting up the field, and then we're setting up our project. And so also notice that there is yellow text both in that dark green section and then in the lighter green section. And so both of these sets of yellow text are still discussing the gap, but we're going to have two different types of gaps here, and both are very important. So the first gap in the first paragraph here in this darkest green section is basically answering the question, why does your entire field of research exist? Okay, so this isn't yet talking about the project. The first thing we want to do is set up why the field of research exists. Then in all of the subsequent gaps, we are setting up why our specific research project exists. So we want to make sure we have both levels of that gap also in our introduction, just to make sure that first the reader can see the importance of our field. Because again, like the example on radar-based bird migration, maybe they don't see that. And so we're going to first set up the importance of why our field exists, and then we're going to move into the importance of why our specific research project exists. And we're going to highlight that using specific direct statements of the gaps in both of these locations in our introduction. So what I want you to do here and now, your action step here, is to look at your introduction with a critical eye and do the exact same thing. Do you see clear, direct statements of a gap in the field in your introduction? If you do not, you should add those in to every single paragraph. Every single paragraph of your introduction should have some direct statement of a gap in the field. You don't want to just provide the reader infinite information that they have to interpret. You want to tell them why you are telling them this information, and also why that you decided to do this work and this research, or otherwise the importance of your work. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to color your introduction. You're going to see if you have these gap statements, and if not, you are going to go back and add one statement to the end of every single one of your introductory paragraphs except the last, where you're talking about what you did in the paper. The next place where we need gap statements to convey the importance is going to be in our abstract. Similarly as with the introduction that we just covered, I'm going to now show you a colored abstract. If you're interested in how I do this, I have a video of exactly how to do this for an abstract that I will link below. You can go to that. You can use the direct instructions from there to color your own abstracts. Notice here that the abstract is going to have some sections that look very similar to our research paper. So the beginning of the abstract has some sections colored in green that are related to the introduction. The main thing that I want you to focus on here is, again, that text that is relating to a gap, okay? This is here still yellow text in the abstract showing direct statements of a gap in the field. And notice here that there is a direct statement in yellow text of a gap that was missing in the field, the whole gap explaining why your research needed to exist, why you needed to do this work, okay? This is another way we're going to convey the importance of our work. And here in the abstract is a really easy way to do this. So look at this abstract and read it with and without this chunk of text conveying the gap. It really changes everything and makes it very much more difficult actually to try to figure out why the reader is doing this work and why this work is important. Luckily, again here, also a very easy fix. So your action step here is to look at your own abstract. Even if you don't want to fully color it like I've shown you here in these examples and like I do in that other video on my channel, you can still look for that direct statement of a gap. So look for this statement. It should be within the first sentences containing the introductory material of your abstract. If those couple sentences of introductory material do not contain a gap statement, you need to fit one in there. This will usually involve either cutting down some of the existing text that is in there, or you will have to add this text and cut from somewhere else. There needs to be a gap that is directly stated and clearly indicating to your reader why this work was done, which is what you need to convey why this work is important. And finally, the last section I'm going to talk about here is going to be kind of an easy one. In grant proposals, this same exact strategy applies. Our grant proposals also need to have these very direct statements of existing gaps that show why it is important to do the work that we're proposing in this research proposal. And luckily also, the way that these are inserted in a grant is exactly the same way that we do it in research papers. So your grant is also going to have some kind of abstract. Maybe it's called a summary, maybe it's called an executive summary or specific aims page, depending on where you're located, but some sort of opening, often full page, sometimes also the short abstract. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it's called. It doesn't matter what the length is. What we need is the direct statements of a gap on that page, also towards the introductory section of it. So if you're doing a normal size abstract from your grant, then this is just going to be within the first 2, maybe 3 sentences. If you have a full-length page that you get to use for the summary of your grant, this is going to be at the end of the first paragraph. Then also, your grant proposal is going to have some introductory material. You're going to have to provide background on what's been previously done in the field. And throughout these sections, we are also going to include direct statements of a gap. And we're going to do this in the exact same way as the introduction, making sure that every single paragraph of our introduction of our grant, just like our research paper, ends with a direct statement of the gap. So finally, at the end of this video, what you need to do then to make sure you have gaps in the appropriate places of your research paper or your proposal, it's going to be the same for both research paper and proposal. So in your introduction, you want to make sure that every single paragraph of your introduction ends with a statement of a gap. And we're going to have 2 types of statements. First ones that explain why our field of research exists. So what out there in the world is missing that means we need to do our research. And then we're going to have statements of why our specific research project. So what is missing from our field? What knowledge, what holes are out there in our field that explain why our research project exists? Then finally, we're going to add a sentence also into our abstract. If this is a grant proposal, maybe it's a longer 1-page abstract, or maybe it's called something else, but it's still going to be roughly your abstract. Again, within the introductory few sentences of this, we're going to end that with a direct statement of a gap of why we did this research project to help convey this importance. Just a tip for the way that you want to do this, always use a negative word to signal the gap. So when filling in these sentences for your reader, just use some kind of negative wording here. It's usually often something like but or however to indicate that this is the beginning of the gap. And you can use some kind of word like unclear or unexplored to also indicate what might be missing. So hopefully this has helped you figure out how to include gaps and where to include the gaps in your research papers. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get the next videos in this series where we're going to cover more problems that come up that prevent your reader from seeing the importance and show you, like in this video, exactly how to fix these in your own paper. Happy writing!